So friends, remember how Donald Trump's flunky, the D.C. U.S. Attorney Jeanine Pirro, engaged in prosecutorial overreach in two cases involving protesters, one of whom was the guy who threw the Subway sandwich at a police officer? Recall that the grand jury in both of those cases rejected Pirro's attempt to charge the protesters with felony assault, because these weren't felony assaults. Well, we have an interesting update in those two cases. Let's talk about that, because justice matters. Hey all, Glenn Kirshner here. So friends, Fox News host turned DC's top prosecutor, Jeanine Pirro, doesn't know what the hell she's doing at the DC U.S. Attorney's Office, which was my professional home for decades. Either she doesn't know what she's doing, or maybe she just doesn't care. Maybe she's not interested in doing the right thing based on the facts and the law. Let's start with the new reporting. This from the Washington Post. Headline: Prosecutors charge D.C. sandwich thrower with misdemeanor. And that article begins: federal prosecutors filed a misdemeanor charge Wednesday against a D.C. man who threw a sandwich at a federal officer in protest of President Donald Trump's law enforcement surge in the city, shifting tactics after a grand jury declined to indict Sean Charles Dunn on a more serious felony count. U.S. Attorney Jeanine Pirro's office has failed at least 4 times this month to persuade grand jurors to indict people who have been accused of assaulting, resisting, or impeding federal officers, an extraordinary turn, given that grand juries almost always approve indictments. The rare resistance by the grand jury, and friends, I'm not so sure I would characterize that as resistance. It conjures up notions of politics. I would call it the grand jury being guided by the facts and the law, and Jeanine Pirro didn't have it 4 times. My editorial edition. The rare resistance from a body of local citizens, the grand jurors, shows the limit of Pirro's strategy of seeking the toughest possible charges for all defendants arrested amid Trump's crime crackdown. A prosecutor in Pirro's office filed a 1-page criminal information Wednesday charging Dunn, 37, with a misdemeanor count of assaulting, resisting, or impeding a federal officer during the August 10 incident, which was captured on a viral social media video. U.S. officials said in court filings that Dunn, who worked as a paralegal at the Justice Department before being fired over the sandwich throwing, berated a group of federal law enforcement officers at a popular nightlife area at the intersection of 14th and U Streets, Northwest, calling them fascists, chanting shame, telling them to leave the city, and ultimately pelting an officer from Customs and Border Protection with a sub. Dunn was arrested days later at his D.C. apartment in what his attorney, Sabrina Schroff, described in court as a 20-person raid. The White House featured the arrest in a sleek social media video. Pirro took to her X account to jab back after the arrest, saying, quote, "He thought it was funny. Well, he doesn't think it's funny today because we charged him with a felony," Pirro said. So there, stick your Subway sandwich somewhere else. And friends, I have 2 observations about that social media post, that statement by Jeanine Pirro. You know, as a federal prosecutor for 30 years, I can't begin to tell you how wildly inappropriate and unethical a statement like that is. You know, we have rules of ethics as prosecutors. We have prohibitions, including we're not allowed to make public statements against pending cases about defendants that might interfere with their ability to get a fair trial. And a statement like that is clearly designed to poison the well of public opinion against Sean Charles Dunn. And the second observation is, don't you love the way Jeanine is pounding her chest and crowing about how she's brought felony charges? Yeah, well, a grand jury said, not so fast, Jeanine, back up. The facts don't support an 8-year felony crime for the man who threw a sandwich at a police officer, and they refused to indict the charge that Pirro wanted them to indict. Thank goodness we have the grand jury sitting as the conscience of the community to guard against Jeanine Pirro's overreach, abuse, potential misconduct. Yes, all my editorial edition. Days before the D.C. grand jury voted Tuesday not to indict Dunn, grand jurors in the same courthouse voted 3 separate times not to indict another protester, Sidney Reed. Prosecutors said an FBI agent injured her hand as Reed rowdily protested a U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement arrest at the doors of the D.C. jail last month. After the grand jury refused to indict her, Reed was also charged with a misdemeanor violation of assaulting, resisting, or impeding a federal officer. Without the approval of at least 12 grand jurors, prosecutors cannot file felony charges punishable by more than 1 year in prison, but they are allowed to charge misdemeanor violations for which the maximum sentence is a year in jail without grand jury approval. In the Dunn and Reed cases, a felony conviction would have been punishable by up to 8 years in prison, though neither defendant would have been eligible for the maximum. You know, friends, any prosecutor with any experience in the courts of Washington, D.C., in the grand juries of Washington, D.C., could have told you these were misdemeanors at most, not felonies. This is an example. These are 2 examples of gross attempted overcharging by Jeanine Pirro. But friends, here's the other thing. I can't wait for these 2 defendants to have their trials, Sean Dunn and Sidney Reed. Let's unpack this for a minute. They are going to have one hell of a selective prosecution claim. Why? Well, first of all, Jeanine Pirro tried to grossly overcharge them with felony crimes when the facts only supported at most misdemeanor offenses. And then they were charged with misdemeanors when Jeanine Pirro failed to persuade grand juries 4 times to charge them with felonies. Let's compare how these 2 protesters were treated by Jeanine Pirro in Donald Trump's administration as compared to the protesters at the U.S. Capitol on January 6th, who beat the hell out of police officers, beat some damn near to death, destroyed parts of the Capitol, hunted for our elected officials to try to stop the certification of an election, to try to stop our votes from being implemented. How did Donald Trump treat those protesters? He pardoned them all, some of them after they were convicted by juries, some of them who were still pending trial, some of them who were just charged. He pardoned them all. I think he gave some government jobs, in fact. Does that feel like a selective prosecution in the way this administration deals with protesters who commit crimes? You're damn right It is a selective prosecution in violation certainly of Dunn's constitutional due process rights, of Reed's constitutional due process rights, and I can't wait until we see those selective prosecution claims litigated in those misdemeanor cases. Because justice matters. Friends, as always, please stay safe. Please stay tuned. And I look forward to talking with you all again tomorrow.